And the women.
Hijab. But I mean, my mom, my aunties in my community.
I also want to first start by just saying that our hearts are broken. Yet again, terrorists have struck in an open society. Our friends in Belgium, we've been in touch here locally with the Belgian consulate.
Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti was at the city's Emergency Operations Center Tuesday, just a few hours after the attacks at Brussels.
We have no credible and specific threats about Los Angeles, but whenever there are these incidents, we, of course, make sure that we have a show of force and key infrastructure. We have many of our units that are out there, whether it be bomb technicians, whether it be our K9 units at the airport, to make sure that we have visibility and people know that this is a city that somebody should think twice before attacking.
Before the news conference, the mayor warmly greeted Salam al-Mariyati, the president of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, making sure to include him and all the other community leaders as he spoke on behalf of the city.
We grieve for all the victims of the attacks today, first and foremost, and we're gathered here to express that deepest sorrow from the City of Angels to the City of Brussels.
Good Sunday morning, everybody. I suppose it's inevitable that what has happened, San Bernardino, particularly and now in Brussels, has become part of the American political scene. Here's an example of some of the dialogue that was going on this week.
Listen, Muslim Americans, like all Americans, are bearing the consequences of jihadists waging war against them. Muslims as well are killed by radical Islamic terrorists in the Middle East and elsewhere. New York had a proactive policing program that Mayor Michael Bloomberg championed to work cooperatively with the Muslim community to prevent radicalization, to stop radical Islamic terrorists from carrying out terror attacks before they occur. And Mayor Bill de Blasio, when he came in a peak of political correctness, canceled the program. And it is standard law enforcement, it is good law enforcement, to focus on where threats are emanating from, and anywhere where there is a locus of radicalization, where there is an expanding presence of radical Islamic terrorism. We need law enforcement resources directed there. We need national security resources directed there. The object should be to keep Americans safe, to keep everyone safe.
Can't let fear stop us from doing what's necessary to keep us safe. Nor can we let it push us into reckless actions that end up making us less safe. In our fight against radical jihadism, we have to do what actually works. One thing we know that does not work is offensive, inflammatory rhetoric that demonizes all Muslims. So when Republican candidates like Ted Cruz call for treating American Muslims like criminals, and for racially profiling predominantly Muslim neighborhoods, it's wrong, it's counterproductive, it's dangerous. Americans cannot, and I believe will not, turn on each other, turn on our allies, or turn away from our principles.
Over the years, we have talked about Islam many, many times on this program. First of all, I want to introduce our guest today, Edina.
Edina Lukovic.
See, I'm flustered because I'm going to surprise you with something that I had not planned to talk about. Dr. Maher Hattout, the founder of the Islamic Center, was on this program many, many times, along with Salam. And one of the many, many things that I learned from him, and it just struck me now that you're an example of it, he used to talk about stereotypes and how, the way he would put it, most Muslims are not Arabs, and not all Arabs are Muslims. You are definitely not an Arab.
Exactly, that's the truth. Yeah, my family is from the former Yugoslavia, so we're from the Balkans, and Muslims are all over the world. We are the most diverse religious community on the planet, and you have far more Muslims who are from South Asia and Southeast Asia than you have Muslims in the Arab world. And ironically, here in the United States, there are actually more Arab American Christians than there are Arab American Muslims. So there are, peel back the layers and you learn all kinds of things.
So you are obvious, for people who are aware of such things, you wear the headscarf, the hijab, somewhat modified, is that the way you describe it?
Yeah, I kind of consider it a hybrid hijab, if you will. So the reality is that when you think about Muslim women in the United States, or even Muslim women in the world, statistics-wise, more women don't cover their hair than women who do, and yet, obviously, people associate women with hijabs and associate Islam with that. There's a huge variety of how women who do wear hijab, which is supposed to be a symbol of modesty, so that a woman can be considered for her mind, her intellect, rather than for her sexuality or physicality. And there's a huge variation in how women wear their scarves around the world. So a style like mine is more common in Africa. I see different styles in Malaysia. I see different styles in South Asia, where women sort of wear them more loosely, like Malala. You might see more of her hair showing, but she keeps it draped. So there's a huge variety of styles out there. And for the first 10 years I covered my hair when I started in college, I used to wear it the more traditional way, where my neck was also covered. And the more that time went on, I realized that my identity is hybrid, and that my faith is in an ever, constant motion, and that I too can change and evolve and try different styles. And so my hijab has been part of that exploration.
In view of what's been happening in this country, even before Paris, going back to 9/11, does the hijab make you a target?
I think it makes me a target both for good and for bad. I often tell people that the hardest place for me to be Muslim is in the grocery store. Not because I'm afraid that somebody's going to physically attack me, but because it's where I get the most questions about, frankly, the thing that happens the most often is somebody will either tap me on the shoulder or lean over and say, "Excuse me, why do you wear that thing on your head?" And that's where the conversation begins. And it used to be that I would have an initial, gut reaction of, I didn't ask you why you're wearing those shoes today, right? So, why would you flip that on me? But I've learned over the years that, it's another public square, and that every opportunity to talk to somebody is an opportunity to connect and to see where they're coming from. So yeah, I feel like a target. Most of the time, I feel like a target as an ambassador of Islam or a representative of Islam, and I know that that's a common feeling among American Muslims. And on very rare occasions, I feel like a physical target. I think after events like Paris or San Bernardino or Brussels, where my heart is aching with the victims, I'm also feeling a second layer of looking over my shoulder a little bit, even recognizing that I'm white, I have blue eyes. People don't assume I'm Muslim necessarily, but especially in those moments, that's when I feel more physically vulnerable.
Since Brussels, have you sensed something more out there?
I personally have not. What I have sensed, we've all been through this so many times. And when I say we, Angelenos, Americans, people around the world, we're going through this same cycle so many times, and the hurt doesn't get any lighter, the anguish doesn't get any lighter, but the tragic Groundhog Day feeling of it, I think, is sinking us lower emotionally. So what I feel is that common bond of anguish between people, and in this case, because it took place in Belgium, it doesn't have the physical, the physical closeness like San Bernardino did, where we, as a community, people were left shaking their heads and in deep, deep heartache, and asking themselves, how could this happen right here in our own backyard?
And as I listen to you, I'm thinking about what would we call the traditional conservative Muslims in other parts of the world. You could not dress the way you are dressed now.
Well, there's only two places I could not dress the way I'm dressed now, and that's Saudi Arabia and Iran. These are the only two Muslim majority countries in the world that mandate for a woman to cover from head to toe.
Wearing a burqa.
a burqa or a niqab, right? Those long black gowns that you tend to see in Saudi Arabia. They also require that women cover their faces.
Right.
But ironically, I mean, these are so again, these are the only two countries where there's any kind of mandate. But that flies in the face of what we're taught in the Quran, which is our scripture, where we believe that God says there is no compulsion in matters of faith. So there should be no compulsion. It's about free will. It's about the individual's choice. And so what Saudi Arabia and Iran have done, are doing, continue to do, and especially Saudi Arabia depriving women of their right to drive and other kinds of basic human rights.
Although they can pilot commercial airlines.
Of course they can, yeah. So, but it's so outside the fold of mainstream mainstream Islam as it's practiced around the world. In most parts of the Muslim world, I could I could certainly dress this way. In many parts of the Muslim world, my husband's family is originally from Egypt. A few decades ago, women were more often in miniskirts, in Western styles than they were in hijabs. Societies have fluctuated, but there is still tolerance and acceptance for women to choose how they dress.
But I know we need to take a break, but before we do that, another thought strikes me as I listen to you. On one hand, you have people who are against Islam just to be against Islam. But then I also, we're such a melting pot, and I'm sure that we have people here, men from Saudi Arabia. Do they see you? Do they see you as a threat or something? Someone who is, I don't know, to be.
Beats me,
I don't know.
but look at it this way: there are, we're here in Los Angeles, and we have international students. We have a rich, diverse fabric of society. Anybody who would come here knows that they're coming to the most pluralistic city in the world, the most diverse city in the world. And when I have family, friends, that visit Los Angeles, whether they're from the United States or from other parts of the world, they are always taken aback by how naturally we handle our diversity, how that there's just a comfort and an ease, and that's one of the things that sets Los Angeles apart. And I'm really proud to be connected to a city like that, or a city like this, in which I can feel. I'm grateful, especially in these political times, to live in Los Angeles. There are many parts of our country that are not, that don't have this same atmosphere of inclusion.
And I should mention that you are the Director of Policy and Programs for the Muslim Public Affairs Council, MPAC.
That's right.
We'll talk more when we come back. Wow, you're just natural for television.
My religion.
This is Midday Sunday. Our guest today is Edina Lukovic. She is the Director of Policy and Programs for MPAC, which is the Muslim Public Affairs Council. So what's daily life like for you? in general, but also now in the aftermath of all that's going on?
In general, the way I'd encapsulate my life is I'm a mother and I'm a working woman at the same time. So finding some sort of balance between my professional life as an advocate for American Muslims and a worker in interfaith bridge building and getting different communities together. It brings my parenthood to life, right? It really, I have been working in American Muslim activism and bridge building for 15 years, and I have hit many walls in that time because there have been so many setbacks. It often feels like we go one step forward, 10 steps back, and this, this cycle of violence certainly doesn't help that. Knowing that Muslims are the #1 victims of ISIS, of radical self-styled Muslim groups, brings me heartbreak. But when I go home every day and I see my children, I am reminded why I do this work, and I am reminded why it's so critical that we do come together right now and that we do build these connections and we do get to know each other more right now. We've learned in our house, or we created a word in our house, crisertunity, where we look at every crisis as an opportunity to work harder, to do more. And it's a reflection of what we're taught in the Quran, where we believe God tells us to repel evil with what is better, so that the ones who are like our worst enemies might become like our closest friends. And today, as a Muslim, I spent the morning with my children. It's my husband's birthday. We're going to go to the Dave Chappelle show tonight in town. I have a very average, normal life that involves the same kind of balance and service, hopefully, that other families do.
And you just happen to be a Muslim.
I happen to be a Muslim, so that means that, and in my professional Muslim life, it also means that I have to deal with the crises and I have to deal with the opportunities at the same time.
Yeah. So a question that I used to ask Dr. Hathout, and it was a difficult question, but it's an important question. So we see the turmoil that is going on primarily in the Mideast. But here we have Sunni, we have Shia, we have fundamentalists, we have all kinds of people, but we don't have the same kind of violence that we see there. How come?
I think the main reason that our reality with American Muslims is so different is because of the very character of our country. That as a democracy, that it's not just enough that we get equal rights and equal protection before the law, but that everyone has the opportunity to become American, that's truly the American dream. And so when you come to America, as my parents did in the late 70s, one of the reasons that they left Europe and they left Austria, which is where I was born, was because they realized they could never really be Austrian. And that was a major barrier for them. Unlike that, they came to the United States and they built a life for themselves and they became American, and that their Americanness is equal to everyone else's Americanness. Now, do we always treat each other out that way? No, certainly that's not the case. But that to me is why a big reason for why the American Muslim community is different than what we're seeing in other parts of the world, even in Europe. American Muslims are about 2.5 to 4 million in population, roughly the same size as the American Jewish community. We're spread out all over the country. Ted Cruz's ridiculous statements this week about monitoring Muslim neighborhoods. Well, he needs to realize there are no Muslim neighborhoods. This is this is the first layer of ignorance that's out there. Is we can make these wild statements that we copy paste from other parts of the world, but we need to dig deeper and really understand who our communities are here, because just like, there was a Pew poll a couple of years ago of American Muslims, and it was all in the headline: mainstream, middle class, and moderate. Those were the 3 words that they found at the end of this year-long study of thousands of Muslims.
I cannot help but wonder, though, if Muslims in other parts of the world, if they look at American Muslims as somehow being diluted because they live in America, their faith being diluted because they live in America.
I certainly think that perception is out there on the one hand. On the other hand, there's another perception out there that American Muslims are, should be living in fear, or that they are constant daily targets. And thirdly, there's also this perception of America still this dreamland. People, the Gallup poll folks did a great international survey of Muslims. Where it was representative of about a billion people. And what they did find was animosity towards U.S. policies that had impacted their countries and the ways that they thought that they were viewed. And so I think that it's, again, the game of perception and the ways that, and that's another reason why I look at this election season and what some of our candidates for office are saying and the kind of fear that they're peddling and the hate mongering that they're peddling. And I think to myself, you're giving ISIS and these other radical groups around the world propaganda tools to say, look, America does hate you. Look, the West does hate you. You can hear it from their own mouths. And that betrays who we are as a country. It betrays our national values. It betrays the Constitution. And it betrays the very reason that my parents came here.
In this country today, one hears an awful lot of criticism, an awful lot of fear about Sharia law. And I have to tell you that a few years ago I was covering a protest in Orange County. And there are all these people who kept on talking about, we cannot let Sharia law get a foothold in America. And I said to many of them, well, give me an example of what it is that, well, we don't have time to talk about that now. I just want you to know that. Talk to us about that.
I think that Sharia is is a dog whistle word for Muslim more generally, in the sense that we say Sharia and it sounds exotic and dangerous and menacing, and yet people don't really know what Sharia is. Sharia isn't just Islamic law. It is a whole body of interpretations by people, mostly men, over the course of many centuries that, just like American jurisprudence, right? We have a whole body of law and legal precedents that have been set. The Sharia is like that as well. And the truth is that there's no such thing as the Sharia. You can't pick up a book and say, oh, here's all the rules in Islam, because there are, just as there are multiple interpretations, those interpretations often contradict one another. So this is where you have, again, different, whether you might call them denominations or sects, different interpretations of Islam. And so there is, this is perhaps one of the challenges that I think that people have to understanding Islam, because these hot button words are thrown out to scare, but there's not real meaning behind there. And there has been legislation that has been proposed and I think passed in over 25 or 30 states around the country in the last couple of years against Sharia. And this is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, because American Muslims are not calling for the implementation of Sharia. Nowhere has there been a single case where there has been a campaign or any kind of lawsuit or anything along those lines. The only place that Sharia, if you will, even factors into the common Muslim life is around things like, we know that we pray 5 times a day and how we pray because of the Sharia, what we learn in these secondary sources, or the rights that we have around marriage or birth or death. These are very benign things that are meant to provide some consistency, and it's not more simple than that.
And those same traditions exist in Judaism and Christianity.
They certainly do. Everybody has their rules, if you will, or their code of law. And just like in Christianity and Judaism, where again you have contradictions and inconsistencies and a whole host of different interpretations, the same is true in Islam. So there are very few issues where you can say Muslims believe X, right? We believe in one God, and we believe in doing good on this earth. We believe in mercy and compassion. Everything else is pretty much up for grabs.
And we're going to take a break, but just let me throw in that it's, comparing ISIS to as a representative of Islam is like saying that the Ku Klux Klan is a representative of Protestantism and Christianity.
Precisely.
We need to take a break. We'll do that now.
majority countries.
Spend a lot. We would like to direct your attention to this website. There's the URL, mpac.org. That is the Muslim Public Affairs Council's website. If you have any questions about Islam and what it means, there's a place where you can get a solid, reliable interpretation. If you missed it here, you can also go to our website, which is foxla.com. We also invite you to download our smartphone app, which will, again, connect you to all of the information we have, and it'll connect you to the Muslim Public Affairs Council's site. Stand by, we have a little more to talk about. As we wrap up Midday Sunday, final thoughts? What would you like people who've watched this half hour with us, what would you like for them to remember of this program?
Well, first, I want to thank them for watching. I think in days like these, we need to lean into our curiosity over our state of assumptions. And that's something that I have learned in this work over the last decade and a half. And so I really encourage people to continue to pursue that spirit of curiosity. If you haven't met a Muslim, we're all over the city, and the mosques across the city, they open their doors to guests of all different backgrounds. So you're welcome to do that. The Islamic Center of Southern California is wonderful, and there are many more across the the county. Ultimately, I encourage people to reach out and get to know people who are different than them, because that's the best way that we heal the differences and we find a way together.
Thank you very much for being with us. I know that it
Tony.
took some courage to come here too.
Oh,
I
no.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for being with us. We'll see you next week.